Well, okay, welcome everybody. Welcome people on YouTube, our presentations, presenters, our staff. Thank you for I hope you had a good holiday and a good break. And here we are with our first briefing of the year in regards to our long plan. Today we'll be going through a presentation from Quotable Value, the Three Waters Repeal and Development Contributions Policy. So we'll start with the Quotable Value presentation, please. We've got James Wilson, Sanjay Kanji and Scott McIntyre.
Morning. How you going? Chris is up. Thank you. I don't think I did.
Thanks for that introduction. So we've just completed the Kaipara District revaluation and we had approval from the OVG, or Office of the Valuer General, on Friday. So we're here to give you the presentation. So you've got Scott McIntyre, who is our senior consultant, and we've got James Wilson here, who is our operations manager, and myself, and I am the Auckland Northern manager. So we had a reasonably large team involved with the revaluation. So we also had local valuers as well. So Steve Evans and Julianne Evans, locals from Mangawhai. James will touch on this later in the presentation, but we've also changed how we do our revaluation process. So we've also got a QA, quality assurance team. So we had 3 QA valuers involved in that process as well. So a bit of an agenda for today, basically explain our process and why we do our valuations and the how. Obviously, we'll give you the revaluation results, and I've flipped out some handout notes for you just on the big movers throughout your district, and basically the next process from there, the key dates and obviously objections. Let's hand over to James now.
Thanks, Sanjay, and thank you all for your time today and to kick off the session with this presentation. So we are here today to present to you key updates from the revaluation. We're happy to take questions throughout our presentation, or there'll be a space at the end. Finally, plenty of time for that. And of course, post today, if there are any further questions, we're more than happy to provide context or content for your review post today. So please do interrupt one of us. We won't take offence if it's relevant to the topic we're working through, or as I said, we will have some questions at the end or time for questions at the end. So just briefly, why we do these things and what governs them. Our revaluation is a very prescribed process. The Rating Valuation Act, which was 1998, it was refreshed as a relatively prescriptive act as far as acts of Parliament go. It sets a whole lot of rules contained within the rating valuation rules, handbooks around things like timings, revaluation processes, what we can and can't do, even as far as property categories to an extent, and how you should treat certain properties. So the key point here, a really prescriptive series of rules and process we've worked through with your council teams to arrive at this point, which is a certified revaluation of your district. As Sanjay mentioned, everything that we do is submitted to the Valuer General's office, and the Valuer General will complete a full independent review of our process, of our basis document. So there is a very large document that we produce as part of a revaluation, which has been submitted to council and to the Valuer General's office. That gives all of our rationale, our analysis, our findings, and any commentary we've made around why we've done what we've done. So all of that is audited. We go through, as this council, a really robust on-site audit process as well. We were asked a whole series of questions, justify what we've done, and that then produces a result In your case, and we'll go through this in more detail shortly, it was a good result in the sense that it passed and passed first time with a few little notations from the Valuer General's Office. So very strict and prescribed process is the key to that particular slide. Thank you so much. So just quickly, a wee bit around the OVG or Valuer General's Office process. It has changed rapidly in the past few years. So as you'll be aware, the New Zealand housing market's become a really complex machine. There's been lots of zone changes. There's been lots of events such as natural hazard events which have impacted on the market, properties or locations within the market. And there's also themes and trends like climate change, which must be taken into account. And so what that has meant for New Zealand is that capital values and land values and improvement values being publicly available on every property across the country. That's our rating systems, what we have. They are a really available figure, therefore they're referenced and utilised quite commonly by those buying and selling property, but also by those either central or local government, for example, who might look at those capital values as tools to work through important things such as potentially compensation payouts if there is events. So the point I'm making there is they're utilised for things that they perhaps weren't always intended to be used for, and therefore the quality of the CVs must be up to speed, so up to that level of use. And so the Valuer General's Office, seeing the way things were going a few years ago, introduced a far more robust process in terms of how they do their audits and the system in which they provide advice or recommendation back to us and back to council as a result. So you've perhaps already read ahead here. This is the official audit traffic light system. And this essentially is the scorecard, if you like, for an audit. So the OVG will go through and do their process. They'll then discuss amongst themselves. They've got a scoring framework and they'll produce a result. As you can probably interpret, green is good, red's not so good. And there's various stages in between. So essentially a green or a blue is what we would call a pass. A blue is a pass with some feedback, so observations they've made, probably or more likely things that we need to just make sure we focus on over the next 3 years, the next revaluation cycle. So it might be tidying up some roll maintenance or building consent type process or work for parts of the district. So they would be a pass mark, and that is the mark that we receive as part of this revaluation. So the good news with that, of course, is that your timeline can be held. So your certification, notification, and then moving forward off the new capital values was maintained in this instance, which is a good news story. We're very pleased with that. Just a wee bit of background, because we get these questions quite frequently, as you can imagine, from ratepayers or councillors as well, around rating valuations versus a market value, because they do differ. And this gives some of the key background as to the difference. So the first unique thing for a rating evaluation of an entire district is that they are a snapshot point in time at a single effective date, which is usually in the past. Once we've even released the figures, the effective date will be in the past. And so that therefore means, question.
Through that date is?
Yep, so our date for
1 September 2023.
2023.
Thank you.
I had a question as well.
Yes,
Can I
please.
ask? Yeah, thank you. So just that OCG, whatever you said, OVG, it is yet to be done, and those rating of red and green will come, or it has been done? Because I'm just lining it with your thematic mapping with a lot of reds around.
Right, so that process has been completed, and the audit's been passed and certified. So those traffic lights there relate more to the scoring framework of the auditors. They don't relate to value movements. That's a different tool that we'll talk to shortly, but that's more of a valuation tool. This is the audit process. Good question.
Thank you. So it's all green, I guess.
In terms of the audit result, yes, it's a pass.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So your snapshot point in time, so that means with market movement, so there has been some gentle strengthening since the revaluation date. Those figures obviously are not current market. And that's the second point there too, of course, if markets do change rapidly, you can get ratepayers with some natural questions. But the key point being they're not designed to represent a current market valuation. They are a snapshot point in time. There are some unique things about rating valuations. So to make sure they're always applied in a fair and equitable way. They don't include things like plant and machinery, chattels, a value of certain trees or trees in general. Everything's assessed as freehold. So if there is any leasehold property, of which there's, I think, only small numbers for this district, they're all treated as freehold. The key reason we're doing that is that we're not taking into account individual occupier or lease differences. They're all treated equally as a freehold valuation.
Question, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just on that, do your valuations take into account improvements which don't require a building consent? And secondly, what proportion of the properties that are in the district get an eyeball assessment?
Yep. Yeah, two good questions. So the first one is, yes, when we can find out about it. So obviously works that don't require building consents are more difficult because the data isn't provided to us to do or take into account. We would pick that up by doing things like driving the streets. We have a line flow process where we are looking at and inspecting properties, especially if it's sold. So every sale will get analysed and we'll pick up, has that property had over and above what we can see on paper, if you can use that term. And then outside of that, as we're driving around the districts, we'll be, our valuers are trained to look out for things like, for example, this property is 1950s property on paper, got it being in average condition, but I can see it's been totally tidied up and there's full landscaping, things like that would add some value and we can take it into account there. So there is a way to capture it, but by no means do we inspect every single property in the district. It wouldn't be feasible. And so, sometimes those works might not be reflected in the initial capital value. The objection process, which we'll go through shortly, is designed to capture that kind of information for us. So objections are a great way for us to gather that data. A homeowner or ratepayer might say to us, hey, we don't think you're taking into account our extensive decking, it didn't require consent, or our gardening or landscaping works, and we can then come out there and look at that property and capture that data as part of the objection. So as a process, it's designed to capture that through that feedback loop of the objection.
And put it a little differently, unconsented building work, like building work that should have had a building consent, to what extent is that taken into account?
With difficulty, as you can appreciate. So unless we know about it, through a building consent, it's difficult for us to pick it up. We might occasionally, from being active in the district, come across it, or council might hear about it within reason. But obviously,
the real estate pages.
Yeah, and so when it has been a sale, we can pick them up through that quite frequently. But of course, it's only a relatively small number of properties that sell compared to the stock in the district.
Councillor Lambert.
Thanks. Commercial properties, are they solely based on the capitalisation rates and the rents received?
Yeah, so as part of commercial properties, we send out surveys to commercial property owners, and we do typically get responses. Not everyone will respond, obviously, you don't have to respond, but we do sort of request that they go through the process. From that, we can analyse and understand, what might be, yields, occupancy or whatnot for a district. And then obviously we've also got sales that we can use to analyse to look at sort of what our average yields or rates, and we can talk to, local agency as well or whatnot. So we use a combination of sort of what's on the market, what's sold, and some survey responses to work out, what might be yields or rates by different types of commercial property.
So that's probably the easiest work because it's just a straight calculation, is it?
Yeah. So that'll be
I'll touch on that a bit later, but
Okay.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gentlemen, I may be getting ahead of myself a little bit, but you've talked a little bit about objections and things like that. You give us a sort of an entree into what you normally find, if there is a norm, with objections. Are they more about complaining about the increased value, or that the homeowner, property owner, feels that they're not high enough? Is there a balance in that?
It's a bit of a mixture, to be fair, and it varies from district to district as well. So going back to the previous revaluation in 2020, we had something like 150 objections. So it's roughly about a 1% objection rate up here. Yes. And we generally get between sort of 1 to 2%, depending on the year and what's happened within the district. But again, it is a mixed bag. Some people are complaining because the rates are too high. Other people's complaining because, that might be genuine. They'll put a new bathroom, a new kitchen, and it's too low. They just want it to be reflective of what, it's going to sell for at the market. So there is a mixed bag.
And to your question though, generally it's I feel it's too high, and here's why. As a homeowner, is the general rule of thumb. You do get, I'm too low, and I'd like to bring it up to market, but the majority is usually the key themes are either it's actually a rating inquiry, so it's about their rates payable, which they can still lodge that, but that would usually be directed to council, or it's my value is I think it's too high, or it's missing data. We don't think you've taken into account our renovation. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Excellent, good question so far. So that's the last point there really is that key theme that links in with that process is that we don't come along and sort of make these things up and we think the market's gone up or down by X, we'll just apply that and make it fit. We are looking at sales, so really it's those buying and selling that are setting the values, and it's the data that you hold on your district valuation role that we utilise. So it's important. Valuation, if we get it right, it's just following the market mindset. It's not setting the market. So it's a really important point, and one that can be forgotten by lay people. Thanks, Sanjay. Yeah, just to, and clear, and I won't go through this in detail, but this is a revaluation process on a single page. I'm always, it makes, months of work look really simple. But this is the process end to end. So you can see there just how much of the process relies upon the data that council hold and we hold on the district and on the properties and on the sales being accurate and up to date. So really a revaluation is so much more smooth and accurate if the district valuation roll data is accurate. So we do a lot of work outside of the revaluation phase to maintain that and to make sure it is. But data quality, data accuracy is just golden for us to get those CVs really accurate. And you can see just how many steps in the process relate to data quality or data control. But there is certainly inspections undertaken. So our valuers will inspect a good proportion of the sales in the district, and they'll be identifying which sales are my important or key sales, which ones am I going to use to defend myself to the auditors to justify what I'm proposing as movements, and they'll all be inspected and detailed notes taken about those properties. And then we do use other tools as well. So we do look at, things like what is agency saying, what are other economists saying about markets, are there big plans proposed to change for the district, and what impact might that have on value levels. So we are looking at a whole lot of other pieces of research as well. And then we have a whole suite of tools that we use to pull that together, analyse those and prepare that valuation basis, which is what we submit and what the whole thing is defended on. So you can see there it's a very heavy data exercise combined with the need to have a lot of valuers in the field using their own eyeballs to validate that data and update that data. Just quickly, because it's very relevant to a district, but just as a theme in general, natural hazard and climate change. So I mentioned in my intro that is becoming increasingly important at a government and local government level in terms of, what impact do these themes or trends or real events have on our district or will have on our district moving forward. So valuation will be at the forefront of this, because the question we always get asked is what is the impact on value? You would have all likely read some really open and high profile comments from large insurers in terms of how they view or will view different risks in different locations. They're being very open with their rhetoric that they will be moving towards a model in which premiums will be increased at quite a strong rate for locations they deem as riskier. And if you are in a certain location, they may be beginning to say no when it comes to insuring the asset. As an observation, the general public perhaps doesn't realise what saying no to insurance means just yet, because we haven't had that luckily widespread. But obviously for a mortgage, it means you're not going to likely get a mortgage. So fundamentally can change the valuation profile or framework of a location. We're not there yet for Kaipara or really any big parts of the country, but we're probably not far away. So we have to take it into account. So as part of the revaluation, we are looking at a range of different tools that are out there. There's increasingly more and more data being made available. Here you can see some of the key tools that we use. So EQC has released a tool where anybody can look up settled claims, really handy tool, go and look at it. They can be quite historic, but it does give you a good way to work out, is there a part of the district which is more prone to events than other parts? So handy tool to use. Obviously, there's GIS maps that council make available through a range of data or model data around floodplains, overland flow paths, things of that nature. There's then the placard system, which we all learnt about off the back of some of the recent events over the last 12 to 18 months. We can utilise that to determine not just individual property impact for those properties, but are those areas more prone to events, and should that be taken into account valuation wise? And then there's a whole raft of other quite handy maps out there which are available for us to look at. Thanks, Sanjay. Placarded properties are perhaps the simplest to deal with from a valuation perspective, because there's quite clear categories in terms of the red, yellow or white placards. These are your numbers for Kaipara that we had at reval. They can change a wee bit, but there wasn't huge numbers. And obviously from a red perspective, those properties are effectively being ID'd as being severely impacted, so effectively uninhabitable. And so in that situation, the improvement values are typically entirely removed, and we'll work with council in terms of what the long-term impact for the land value might be. So there's a process in place for that. Yellow is a bit more difficult because it's not necessarily a black and white decision to be made. We have to work through and understand, what is the impact? Is there damage, or is it potential to be damage to the property? And what do we do valuation wise to those? So there would have been some case by case adjustments to those particular properties. But overall, we did have to step back, thanks, next slide, and work through, well, what does that mean? Does that actually mean that we're going to be adjusting pockets of the district downwards as a result? And in summary, for this revaluation, we concluded that no, there was no widespread pockets just yet that warranted a discount for stigmas or these kind of reasons. As you'll see here, there was very limited sales, so it is a bit of a difficult scenario. I mentioned before that valuation is not about us shaping the market. We've got to follow evidence, and so we, through the analysis in this process, couldn't see evidence to support widespread reductions, and so we had discounted pockets or locations as a direct result of climate change and hazard events. Not saying we won't keep an eye on that and analyse sales that come in, but it wasn't warranted at the revaluation date. But it certainly will be a continued theme or trend for us to keep in touch and keep in consultation and through to the suppose as well.
Councillor Lamb.
Just going on that subject of insurance, what do you believe will be the impact of properties not getting insured? This surely will go back on the property owners to self-insure. So would rents rise? And it would be a very much of a widening of the gap. The people who have the money can afford. Do you agree with that or not?
Look, it's crystal ball gazing for New Zealand. It hasn't happened before. I mean, there has been small pockets of insurance retreat, but it is very isolated, and typically the government has stepped in to compensate. That's still being worked through. But overseas, there are examples of insurance retreat, which we can look to. And quite rapidly, what has happened in those markets is effectively it becomes a cash buyer's market almost overnight. They usually phase it in. So as you can imagine, valuations only go one way relatively quickly because you haven't got a mortgage supported market for your buyer pool. So look, the consequences are pretty real, and the flow-on effects need to be carefully managed. So we think, as you can probably appreciate from our presentation so far, our big thing is we need to move towards a world of getting the data out there. The head in the sand mentality can't continue at every level, central, local government, and buyers and sellers. We think it's time that you're better off knowing about what might impact your property, either when you're buying it or if you already own it, because then you can take, mitigating steps or brace for what might come. So data and data sharing is really our key message for that thing.
Can I just follow up on that? Because it concerns me a little. It sounds to me a bit like you are trying to lead the market a little. And I would have thought that in time, if that, I accept the likelihood of insurance companies pulling out in high risk areas, that's entirely logical. That's a rational approach. But if that happens, that will also be reflected in market realisations. And wouldn't that be the time when you change the valuations to reflect that?
Absolutely. Hence why we haven't changed anything just yet. So we have to stick to evidence. So unless we can see evidence in the sales that people are beginning to take it into account, we're not going to come along with a pen and discount for them. It's imperative that valuers or valuation doesn't do that. All that we advocate for is that the data, more transparent data out there, the more informed a buyer can be. So that's really, if they choose not to discount, then the values won't discount either until they decide that it's time to take it into account. So the key takeaway from the revaluation conclusions is that the evidence has to support discounts, or else we can't drive it downwards. It's imperative.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just going back to the previous slide with your placarded properties.
Yep.
We've got 18 in the whole district. Are they in specific pockets or brief?
They were relatively spread from memory, but there were a few little pockets.
There was one particular pocket in Dargaville where those red stickered properties were.
Yep.
And the other ones were spread throughout the district. There's a few in Mangawhai as well.
Yep. Okay.
Excellent.
I guess the lead on for that is something that, we should be now conscious of as council in terms of real concentration. But as you say that, okay, by the sound of things, it seems to be more spread than it is concentrated.
Yeah, that was the observation. So, and of course, what normally happens is that the market pauses, sales activity stops as people work out, let's see how this location is remedied, and then we'll see if the market re-engages again. And at that point is when the evidence will normally come out. But the mindset you really can't adopt is, in lack of evidence, we'll discount because we think it's going down. You have to wait for evidence. Great. Well, that's it from my part of it, guys. So thanks for that. As I said, any questions that might come up later or post this, please send them through to council and we will respond.
Councillor Lamb.
The pastoral land values.
Yeah.
I'm worried about that 1st of September date, because basically the farming sales closed up shop around about April last year. I don't know if that's been reflected. It's really been a massive devaluation in pastoral and land values, but it's showing quite different in our numbers. So
yeah, so it's over that 3-year period. You're completely correct in what you're saying, is that within that previous year, they did shut up shop. We had interest rates increase, profitability of farmers has, decreased quite drastically. But yeah, we are talking over that 3-year period. So most of the increases were through 2021 and 2022.
So if you look at this sort of in a year and a half's time, you'll probably find a 50% devaluation. It's trending.
Next revaluation, which would be 2026, we could see a change.
Oh, we always seem to be getting the highs, valuations on the highs. Yeah, okay.
Excellent.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have 2 questions. One is, in doing your preparation, your research, do you tune into OneRoof or realestate.co.nz at all, like to confirm or compare, like use that as a tool at all?
In terms of, those kind of websites or businesses are using data, they have some unique angles on the market because they're often dealing with what we'd call the coalface of real estate agents or agency. So the data they produce, yes, unconditional sales before they settle, if they're available, we'll look at those and analyse those. We are quite wary of relying on opinion or commentary. We'll obviously we'll look at it and it's quite public, but we have to again come back to evidence and sales. So those kind of websites do produce some quite good empirical data. So
I always thought maybe that there'd be a time when you think one thing and you think another thing, and there's $20,000 difference or something. So see what does one roof say, or like, would you?
Welcome to the world evaluation, but look, it's three valuers will always give three answers, but to an extent, I suppose we just have to plot on through and make sure we remain really independent. Websites and companies will always have a bias for whatever their core business model is, and we have to make sure we are fact-based and data-based.
Just information that's available publicly, I thought. That was my first question. My second question, we're looking to change, we have a targeted rate for forestry, and we're looking to change the means by which that is assessed from a land value basis to a land area basis. And what the key determinant is the identification by QV on what is a predominantly forestry block to qualify as under that land use type. So what is your process for identifying those properties? Because just to tell you, I've had plenty of feedback that there are quite a number of properties out there which are obviously forestry, but they're not showing up as forestry in our records.
Yeah, so we have spent quite a bit of time during this revaluation. So we use basically tools as well as roadside inspections. And then we also can look at, who owns the property. So if it's owned by a forestry company, that's, likely to be forestry property. And aerial mapping tools have allowed us to, just do a quick search actually and spot these properties. Also having locals in Mangawhai, they're basically driving the streets quite regularly. We had regular meetings with Christine and Lani as well. So they put through any information that they had on these properties. But again, doesn't mean to say that what we've done now is set in stone. We do have what's called role maintenance, so we can continually update the role to best accurately reflect what's actually there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Moving on, I'll throw the slot now to go through some more of the tools and process that we have used and do use in revaluation.
Cool, thanks, James. So this here is what our internal monarch thematic mapping. This is just like a check method for us once we set the land values, just to ensure that we're in keeping with relativity and uniformity within the districts. You can see here, this is Mangawhai along the estuary there. So the red hot is the higher land values, gradually going to green and then out to further away into blue, which means lower values. Main things that kind of affect these high values are in Mangawhai would be the views, water views, any closer to the town, the shops itself. And as you gradually go out to the rural sectors of the region, it slowly starts to get lower land values, as well as if you have obviously a larger land area, we can change the parameters, I guess you can call them, to determine a whole lot of different factors, from values of a dollar rate down to values to a square metre rate, and so on. So it's just one of the tools we use for the check method there. Cool, so just a strategic overview of some of the industry changes that we saw come through with this year's revaluation. We had Mangawhai Central's commercial and retail sectors, New World and Bunnings open in late 2022, as well as the Village retail stores starting to open in mid-2023. We had the Mangawhai Central residential development. We were aware that this came to market towards the end of our revaluation, and to the best of our knowledge, it still hasn't sold yet. So that was quite an interesting process to go through that, trying to get information from agents who were too willing to give us information. Then we had a whole lot of plan changes come through from the council. So we had Mangawai Hills, which is the old Freckington farm. That was plan change 84. So that was about 600 residential sections being released, releasing about 50 sections per year. And that goes with their own private water waste care system, as well as a 15-kilometre cycle track, not only for the residents of that subdivision to use, but also for the public as well. Then we had the Rise, which was on the corner of Cove Road and Mangawai Hills Road. That was plan change 83, which had about 360 to 380 sections, ranging in sizes with a large lot precinct as well. That one would connect to the actual already established wastewater section. Then moving over to Dargaville, we had Moonlight Heights, which is just opposite the Phoenix subdivision, if you guys are aware of that one, just off Awakino Road. That was plan change 82, and that had an estimated about 324 residential sections. And then we had the Dargaville Racecourse as well, which is plan change 81. Now this had a whole lot of sections for retirement, village, light industrial, and as well as residential. Another key indicator was the opening of Te Ari and Tara Iti golf courses. Although on the Auckland and Kaipara borders, the golf courses themselves would rely heavily on Kaipara for staffing and housing. Yeah. Then we had MetLife Care, which got resource and sent to build Mangawai's first retirement village, which would expect to house over 300 residents and 160 villas and a 45-bed hospital. Efforts were expected to start beginning of this year. Another key indicator for the region was the northern corridor opening between Puhoi and Warkworth, allowing easier access into the Kaipara region. Although COVID effects have put on the wayside a bit for this revaluation, we did see that the work from home aspect is still very much there in the market, meaning that people don't have to commute as much into Auckland, which is increasing in the Mangawai values as well. With all these plan changes coming through with Mangawai, as well as opening, that just backs up the point that we saw this revaluation that Mangawai was the fastest growing coastal settlement in New Zealand, which would reflect values as well as all those plan changes. A little over 2,000 sections are going to come to the market shortly.
Can I just interrupt you? There's a question there from Ash Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We've lost you, Ash.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My computer is playing around since morning. So just a question on, we all talked about those falling values a year ago, which obviously have not been considered in this. My question is more related to not discounts, because we are not giving any discounts for those placarded property, but on the strategic overview, we have given a great hope of many developments, many projects happening. So can I assume then it has helped you in inflating the valuation, considering what is going to be in Kaipara district in coming years? So is there a bias towards higher valuation rather than lower valuation because of the strategic overview? Thank you.
I'll take that one. Difficult to respond because it's forecasted and crystal ball gazing as supplement valuers will run a mile from. But, so the short answer is I wouldn't assume anything, any kind of growth, is guaranteed at all. What we can do though is look back, economically the district is through the district plan and various other zoning and policies has obviously identified that growth is needed / could be good for the district. And there's, as Scott just walked through, there's a lot of plan changes which are unlocking that growth. And so, demand has been there for it. Nothing has changed overnight to say demand won't be there for it in the future. I think the key will be like any kind of new growth area. We've seen a lot of us, if I could talk to a neighbour, Auckland, on the fringes where where growth has been going on in a big way, it really comes down to making sure it's controlled and that you're not dumping 2,000 on the market at one time. So how that rolls out will impact heavily how valuations roll out over the next few years, but we can't give a comment to guarantee that they'll continually go up or down or sideways. The market has to drive that.
But Scott, my question is very specific. So you haven't considered any effect. We are talking 2,000 houses in 1,900 odd in Mangawhai and similar 600-700. So it's a significant growth we are projecting, and we have seen it in the past in Mangawhai Central as well. So what my question was very specific, because this plays a big role in what percentage increases you're assuming. So what you are telling me that you haven't given any, because also it also affects the sections at which they will be sold, because if the current valuation are theirs, the coming sections obviously will go with the market price. So, but you haven't considered that part, you're telling me, right?
Yeah, correct. We don't forecast values. We're just looking back on evidence that's transacted throughout the 3 years. So short answer is there's no forecasting that of values that's been taken into account.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Menison.
There are a lot of paper roads in Kaipara Council. Are these being valued and attributed to Kaipara District Council?
In terms of if they give access to a back block or something like that, and we know about them, then they may be adding or detracting from value for a parcel of land they give access to. I wouldn't know how they were treated in terms of were they separate rating assessments.
So yeah, we only so one rate, basically a rating unit, a certificate title constitutes a rating unit. There's quite prescriptive rules under the Act and the rating valuation rules of how we have to assess properties. So just a general road, if it's got no title, it won't have a value assigned to that property.
They have, do they not, significant value in a forestry sense?
In a forestry sense, they would, because...
And is that therefore attributed to Kaipara District Council? Or is it a free benefit to the adjacent landholder?
It's probably more so that the free benefit to the landowner than, yeah, attributing rates to the council.
But the uptick in value on the property it's affording access to can, of course, be taken into account in that capital value for that rating assessment. So to an extent, the benefit to a property would be taken into account, but it comes down to whether or not that's a separate assessment or not. We can look into that, you know, if there's...
Would it be fair to say these are seriously undervalued as to Kaipara District Council?
Can't comment officially without going through the exercise, but as we mentioned, if they give access to a property and that property benefits and value, then that will be taken into account. Can't comment if they are undervalued or overvalued or whatever, without knowing if they're separate assessments or not.
Thank you. Councillor William.
On the revaluation overview, you've got a list. What would that generally encompass?
So that's like parks and reserves. Yeah, generally parks and reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in terms of just a quick high level over the residential strategic overview. So the typical land values we saw in the main townships of Kaipara, which was Mangawhai, Dargaville and Kaiwaka Mangataroto. So for a small site, so that's kind of anything under 600 square metres, you're kind of looking on an average of 450,000 for the 2023 revaluation. And on an average sites, which can range anywhere between 600 and 1,000, you're looking between 800 up to 800,000 on average. In Dargaville, those smaller sites at 180,000 with an average for the average size sites of 210,000. Kaiwaka was 250,000 for small sites with an average of 320,000 for overall sites. In terms of CV value range, Mangawai holds the largest CV values in the district, with 2-bed dwellings being between 650 to 850, 3 beds being between 800 to 1.2, 4 beds being between 900 to 1.5, and modern dwellings being anywhere between $1 million plus.
Slide. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Can I ask that with regard to the land that would otherwise require a planting setback adjacent to a paper road, that I gather it will probably be ignored in practice. Is Kaipara District Council recovering any value from such land?
So you're referring to if there's a covenant or similar instrument that restricts use of a portion of a block that would.
I understand that legally.
Yeah.
The adjacent landowner would not be able to plant to the boundary line because of the setback. But given that it's a paper road and extremely unlikely to be opened, it'll probably find that the land is planting to the boundary and utilising therefore a portion of the land that, strictly speaking, the council could enforce a legal setback.
Not sure how that's treated, or can't comment on how that's treated from a rates remission perspective. From a valuation perspective, it will depend on how that instrument is legally created. So if it's covenants, for example, then from the outside, from us as valuers, we can see those covenants. And if they're widespread, determine their impact on value. They're often not. They can be contained in other documents or other adjoining documentation around the creation of the paper road when it was created historically. And in that sense, it's very difficult to actually determine or even ascertain what those rules might be. So the objection process would allow a property owner of an adjoining property to object on that basis, and we would obviously then do a more detailed review of an individual property impact, and that's our best way to get the chance to do that review.
Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just going back to the previous slide and the previous one, the strategic overview. You've mentioned there specifically the Northern Corridor Road, and we haven't had a year of that yet, and we've got plenty of anecdotal evidence of what difference that might have made. The most physical one being time taken to travel to Auckland and not. What evidence did you come across that is having, if any, an effect?
Yep. So one of our main processes when we're going through the land sales and sales during the revaluation is talking to agents. A lot of the comments came from the agents that work on the ground that just because that motorway is opening up or the potential for it to open up from previous in the future, people were already starting to look ahead to buy those sections in Mangawai or the surrounding districts, knowing that is going to open up and the commute is going to be a lot shorter. So I was talking to the people on the ground.
Okay, so there's not actually evidence.
So we bring up a sale price and go, why do you think that price was reached? And they go, oh, well, these people were from Auckland, for example, and they realise that the motorway is going to be opened up shortly. So therefore they were getting ahead of the market and paid that price.
It's in terms of do we have a specific dollar range that's just for that one particular variable? No, we don't. It's not the way of the market mindset, I suppose, works. But that mindset is a powerful changer of behaviour. You know, you had other variables too. The market was suppressed in general. So as you've heard anecdotally, and as we've heard from agents and seen in the market, you know, it's only had a positive impact in terms of how buyers or would-be buyers are viewing the district.
And anecdotally, is that also affecting some of our other areas like Pahi, Irau, Tupai, Paparoa?
So to the back end of the district. Anecdotally, you'd have to say, yes, that mindset, opening up the location in general, has a positive impact, as to how they're viewed. But it's one of many variables we look at in terms of, I mean, the same as just, market mindset in general. You know, there has been a very cautious mindset we're seeing every day that's unlocking slowly but surely. It's hard to point to exactly why it is. It's a mindset, you know, markets are imperfect in that sense.
They're emotional sometimes, aren't they?
Highly, which us valuers don't like.
Yeah. Is there someone else with a question there, councillor?
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that Kaipara District Council is not recovering substantial sums that are potentially available to council from the utilisation of adjacent property owners of that land?
My response is that it is case by case, and without going through the objection process to determine if a increase or decrease to value is warranted and what levels that might be, we probably can't comment further today, but we'd certainly encourage property owners in those situations to object. That allows us the chance to get in there individually and analyse all of those variables to determine overall impact on values. So we'd strongly encourage to use the objection process for those properties.
Would you expect that Kaipara District Council could recover a very substantial sum from the, I suppose, the exploration of the legislation regarding the plantable areas that council controls or could control?
Similar response, which is until we know the overall impact, you know, you're going to have some impact, some you've described will add value, some will subtract value. So until we actually get the chance to work through individually, we won't know the overall impact. And so I can't comment in terms of the potential.
Thank you. Any further questions there? Right, councillor Larson.
So could you just clarify me this diagram where it's got the house price index with a red underline? Is that the red line down the bottom, or is that indicating that you have the house price index selected? Which is a different amount? There seems to be a red line adjacent to 1400. Is that related?
Oh, no, I think that's just the bottom of the graph.
That's just the x-axis.
Yeah.
And so is this graph showing the house price index?
Yes.
The red line under the house price index is indicating that feature is selected rather than correct.
Yep. So this graph here, so it's important to note that although in the general feel and what's been presented in the media that the market has come down the last 12 months, we have seen an increase in Kaipara from the last revaluation. So you'll be able to see on the graph here, although it's started coming down from 2022, from the last revaluation, which is where the black line is, it has increased to where we are at in September 2023. So just because in the media it's been presented that, the market's come down in the last 12 months since your guys' last revaluation in 2020, it's still increased from those values because you guys were before the boom in the peak of 21, 22.
Yeah, all the extra money sloshing around the economy back then after COVID.
Yeah.
Councillor Lambert.
The 1,400 and 1,600, is that price per square metre?
No, those are actually we're on the index approach here, so it's a very statistic.
Okay, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, that's everything from me. I'll hand it over to Sanjay now to talk about the commercial industrial side of things.
Yeah, so on the business side, there's not a large number of commercial industrial properties within your district. It's mainly centred around Dargaville and Mangawhai. So as you're saying before, realistically, pragmatically, it would be quite a straightforward process to value commercial industrial properties. However, what we noticed during the revaluation is that there were a low number of transactions. It's not meant to say that properties don't transact in your district. It's just that what we tend to find is that the more long-term investors or long-term holders, owner-occupiers. So what we've had to do is gather secondary evidence. So what we do is we send out rental surveys We also, talked to a lot of the agents on the ground, also analysed sales throughout the, through neighbouring districts. So there is, similar to other areas throughout the country, industrial property has increased quite substantially compared to other types of properties. We're seeing a strengthening of rents, and generally yields have remained static or slightly decreased. So overall, what we're seeing is an increase to business properties. In the rural and lifestyle, so lifestyle similarly to residential, we've seen stronger increases, and similar to the residential and Mangawhai, we've got slightly stronger increases there. We've got higher percentage increase to the lower land values, so you might see that smaller areas, they have come up proportionally at a higher percentage rate, but they're still overall sitting quite low. So you might see in Rural Wai, for example, we're looking at valuation of $400,000 on average, but Mangawhai we're sitting at about 1.2 million. And in the rural sector, what we've noticed is that there's strong demand for those small pastoral blocks. So that's almost a flow-on effect from the lifestyle market. And there has been some pastoral conversion to forestry, as well as smaller sort of dairy to forestry as well. But yeah, we haven't seen those big increases to your pastoral and dairy. They've been more sort of modest increases. Talking about your property mix. So, you're almost 50% of your properties are residential in your district. And then you've got quite a large number of lifestyle properties. About a third of those properties are lifestyle. And I was saying before, commercial and industrial is only sitting at about 3%. Other properties 5.4%, and rural about 10%.
Councillor Lambeth, followed by Councillor Howard.
I think I've just answered my question. It's not the actual volume of land, it's the actual titles, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so these are our actual rating units. So there's 16 or over 16,000 rating units within your district.
Yeah, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just going back to page 16, you make the comment that high demand for industrial property, which is actually interesting given we have a new economic development lead here in the meeting, and it's an area that we're looking at. So is this suggesting that there are people, businesses already looking to establish here? Is this new businesses establishing?
There's almost two things going on here. So the first thing is that with industrial properties, there's reasonably low supply. So what we found is that there is new businesses coming here, and if they can't find what they want, they're going to, design and build something that's fit for their purposes. So yeah, that's mainly what's happening.
So that's what's driving that.
Yes.
Okay. As a general theme for industrial, we've seen across the country the last 24 to 36 months a big boost in demand. It's coming. It's a search for yield in a lot of areas. This is for buying, not renting. What I'll call mums and dads. So that would have been more historically residential investors. Their portfolios are getting to a certain size where they're chasing yield, long-term yield over capital growth, and they couldn't get that from residential. So they looked into entry-level industrial, and as a result, in districts like this, we saw an absolute surge in demand, and that's translated to a surge in values too. That's the fact of it. The risk in that, I suppose, where, for example, the banking sector is looking at is those owners are not what you call mature, not in age, but in profile of industrial ownership. And so when things get tight, vacancies, not saying we're there because there's a shortage, but those kind of impacts are riskier than a new longer term commercially minded owner. So just a unique trend for New Zealand, not unique to Kaipara, but certainly has had an impact.
Okay, I've got questions from Councillor Vincent, followed by Councillor Lambert, followed by Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Back on the forestry trail, Sanjay. do you make any distinction? It's just, you're highlighting the conversions from dairy to forestry. Any distinction between production forestry and carbon farming?
I'm not a rural valuer, so I can't comment as to that.
But like if you observe driving past, there are planted in orderly rows of say pine trees, whatever, you're not going to be inquiring as to what the intended use is.
So we certainly have a separate category for carbon farming versus a more traditional forestry use. And when we're able to capture it, we'll note those down. The data will reflect that. As to impacts on value treatments, that's still probably more relevant to our rural expert who's not here today. But in terms of can we store them as separate categories? Yes, we can.
I'm not interested in that. Actually, I'm not advocating for that to happen.
Yep.
I just think that if it's a forestry block, I mean, there are consequential impacts of both systems, and but I'm thinking from a point of view of rating, I'd like to make sure that they were all in the net. I guess
the important thing for us is the bio profile of a carbon, a planted established carbon block versus a more traditional forestry block is quite different. The biopool and the bio profile, so it has the potential to impact value as a result. So hence why we need to identify and capture limits. We wish there was a definitive source of the use that we could have access to. There's not yet because it's still relatively new. The mainstream uptake of carbon farming. So yeah, we can store it differently. We're aware of the difference in the dynamics, but there's not a single great source of that data.
There's another aspect to that story, which is our district plan review, which so that's another story, but I just was wanting to make sure, as far as rating is concerned, that those properties are picked up. Thank you.
Councillor Lambeth.
Very, very quickly, just concise questions. The rent summary, is that per square metre or is it?
It's per square metre.
Okay. And the other thing is the distinction between Mangawhai and Dargle with the high demand for industrial property and the low vacancy rates. Were they across the board for both areas?
Industrial?
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you consider those, were you surprised at the very low vacancy rate, commercial vacancy rate in Dargle?
I guess it's generally with the low vacancy rate, just because of the low supply, that creates stronger demand. So guessing that's why we've got such a high demand for properties.
Okay. It's the same theme we saw what we've seen across the country. So to an extent, we expected it. So answer directly, weren't surprised that once analysed it revealed the same low vacancy as we've seen in other outlying districts.
Okay, Ash, we'll have your question, then we'll let our visitors complete their presentation. We'll allow for one last question at the end because we're running out of time. Ash?
Mine is, sorry, just a follow on the industry part, if you allow me. It's just a quick one. And it is just to ask the basis of this, that there's a high demand for industrial property, because I haven't come across any inquiries. And if you say it's mom and dad, it is like a small industry, like a workshop kind of business. It's not an industrial property. That's what I want to ask. What drives the presumption that there is high and lack of industrial properties in Kaikoura? Thank you.
Yes, so there certainly is a wide range of what is industrial properties. Like with residential or rural, they have their own unique categories as well. That the demand amongst what I coin as mum and dad buyers is typically the smaller end of town. So they'll be your smaller warehouses or factories, if you like to use that term, but warehouse is the official category, where they have usually single occupant and a relatively low maintenance profile and strong yield as a result. So that's where typically that demand comes from. Obviously, the larger end of town being multi-tenanted, purpose-built, quite specialist industrial assets, that still tends to be your commercially orientated larger business will build or build and rent, build and lease those properties out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Cool, I'm conscious of time, so I've put this draft here together, and but I've also provided you with a handout, so that breaks it down by category as well as location. But yeah, here basically it shows what each category has increased, so capital value as well as land value. As I was saying before, industrial has increased the most, whereas dairy and pastoral have had sort of average increases. Residential, you can see that the land value there has increased quite substantially, but again, that's coming off a low base there. And the next steps in the process, so we've obviously completed your revaluation. The next step is that we'll send owners notices out, so they're posted end of this month. From there, it's got all the details in there of what your new valuation is. If you've got any questions, you can call our 0800 number. Also provided your council with our frequently asked questions, because you guys might field some questions from ratepayers as well. They're welcome to phone our 0800 number. Objection period closes on the 7th of March, and from there we'll be completing your objections, and they'll be used for rates from 1 June this year. So that's basically what I've just said, the objection process. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. If there's any more questions.
Thank you. Time for one quick question, everybody. Does someone want one? Look, we can contact you personally by email. So look, I thank you. It's a very informative presentation, and it will help us guide our way through some of the discussions we need regarding making, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
you.
Thanks all.
Okay, we'll
Thank you.
10-minute break. Come back 16 minutes past 11. Eh?
He must be. One pin and one pin only, number one.
Very good.
Yeah, good morning. In the interest of time, I'll just flick us through these things and assuming that you've read the papers. Thank you also for giving us some extra time this morning on the end of the quotable values things to cover off. So what effectively happened is you went into recess and the next day the central government announced that they would be repealing the Three Waters legislation, which for us in the long-term plan project means three waters, water supply, stormwater and wastewater need to come back in as activities. So what we need to do is patch Three Waters up and review any of the other impacted documents you've already seen coming through. It's not usually a major on those, it's just a tweak, but we'll make sure that you see them in their amended state if Three Waters has affected them. So we've got three things happening. One is we'll process Three Waters as quickly as we can and that's why Anand's here today with the team. We'll review any of the others and then continue preparing the documents that we were already working on. We're expecting to add a month to the dates. The government has enabled extensions to the adoption of the long-term plan. We've worked through with the staff and think we just need one extra month just to make sure there's time to think through and process the new content, but also to give us more time to deliberate over the finances. This would move consultation to April, it was in March, and adoption to July, which was in June. We were concerned about the impact if we take, so government suggested 3 months or offered 3 months, but there's a significant impacts on our rating if we do take the full 3 months, and that's detailed in the report that you've received. It also impacts council's income and cash flow and knocks on to the resourcing for annual report and annual plan, which are processes with their own deadlines. So our chart that we had before looks exactly the same. We're just moving 1 month out and you'll see the new timeline along the bottom there, April. We'll be consultation in April. We'll have hearings and deliberations in May, writing the document up to June, and then start bringing a draft document, July briefing, and then with the view to adopt at the end of July. This is what will come to you. So we're doing all the work in February, which we'd actually already pretty much done in December. So it's just catching those things up. And then we'll finalise everything in March, ready to go to consultation in April. And I'll pass you to Anand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we had the repeal notice, my team, myself, have been working quite busily over the last couple of weeks to present back to council what Three Waters inclusion into our LTP would look like for the first 3 years. You would have noted my original sum of 600 million over 10 years is what we had come up with from the very start of our analysis. The Department of Internal Affairs then came in and started to develop a Entity A asset management plan. And through various meetings and moderation sessions, that number came down because it was including all of Auckland and Northland. And then the final position was presented by DIA on 1 November 23 at the briefing, where the envelope is now was 493. So they took all of that into consideration when they were doing their price part. So now that Entity A is not proceeding, it's a little bit of a shame. But we're now having to incorporate what's affordable back into our LTP. The approach we're taking here, Mr. Mayor, is we're saying that roading is all about recovery, and I'll be presenting that a new position on the 7th. And waters is all about growth and renewals. So those are the two categories that we're focusing on when it comes to waters. You will note in the spreadsheet that the first 3 years of the Entity A AMP identified around about $140 million of investment that we needed to do across the three categories: water, stormwater, wastewater. bringing it back into Kaipara, we've taken a hard decision to really look at what is needed in the 3 years to address those topics of growth and renewals. And you'll see there's a flatter line in terms of, $10 million, $18 million and $28 million. So that comes to a total investment of $57 million over the first 3 years. Now, what we have been able to do, and you'll see there's a big thing called first draft written in the paper, is that this is really our first indication. We've only had 2 weeks to bring in. Today's about socialising any specific areas or concerns that you will have. But we will be bringing back details at the 21st briefing where more granularity around each of the projects will be presented. The further sheets that we have provided give a 10-year view. And the purpose of that 10-year view, Mr. Mayor, is that it allows Sue to then commence calculations around the development contributions. A lot of these are growth-related projects. So taking a 10-year view allows Sue to come up with indicative DCs, and we'll talk about that in the next paper. You will note that I said over the 10 years we needed 600. The final moderation came down to 493. What we are proposing over the 3 years and 10 years now is close to $348 million. There are a few things that are still missing from this. You will recall, Mr. Mayor, that we did a submission on the draft FPP that yourself and Councillor Howard and the Chief Executive signed off on. That went into DIA. I mean, that's just sitting there now. But one of the things, there was a couple of items that we wanted them to bring back in at Paparawa. Was one of them. We're going to have to, over the next couple of weeks, just look at how we can bring back that scheme, and there'll be a public scheme as opposed to a private scheme. So there are a few things that still need to come back in. The consequences of that may be that a few things need to get pushed out. But really today is about presenting you with a high level indication of what our 3 years looks like and what our 10 year looks like.
A question.
You're open for questions, Sarah? Yeah, open for questions, Mr. Mayor. Okay, well, Ash was first on the go there, up on there, and then followed by Councillor Vincent. We have one question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Anil, first of all, Happy New Year. So, coming back to what we did, and we did a lot of it, and obviously we have to undo that and do it again. So, first question is, are we not again going in a hurry? Or are we seeking some more clarity from the present government in terms of the three water structure? Whilst it could be not entity A, but it could be whatever entity, and a CCO model. So which means we'll not need to do anything on three waters. Do you think that is a possibility or not? And two, why we are hurrying up in 1 month? I know there will be some difficulties in rates and all if extended to 3 months. Why we are not choosing to take the 3 months reprieve so we get a clarity on this part and we don't make the same mistake again with numbers. And the third thing I'd like to know, that draft submission, I'm not aware, but it was not shared with the councillor, or maybe I missed it. Yeah, these are the little 3 questions. Anil, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll answer the 2 and I might seek clarification on the 3rd. So in terms of the first question, we have been directed by the Minister to include the 3 waters in our LTP. So that is a directive that we have to follow. And if anything is to proceed beyond that, that is absolutely a bonus. But at the moment, there is limited information coming about what the next stage is. So what we're working on at the moment is that the direction given by the Minister that we put back 3 waters, and that's the purpose of the presentation today. And in terms of rushing, I don't think we are rushing, and we haven't made the mistake in the past, because the good work that we have done with DIA has actually allowed us to bring back a lot of work with some confidence in a very short period of time. I think Sorry, councillor, can you just explain the third question? I missed it.
Oh, I must have forgotten it too.
Okay. That's all right.
But I can replace the question with, you said any concerns on that? So you mentioned on wastewater, a significant figure. And if I break it up, I think there was more than 20 million on Mangawhai. And there is a growth area in Dargaville as well. And there were a couple of million. And can you tell me why such a small sum for Dargaville? Because the need for growth and need for these facilities in Dargaville is as big as in Mangawhai.
Yeah, so what we're doing at the moment, councillor, is that we're balancing our money that we have available across the district. So we've identified that the Mangawhai treatment plant is coming up to capacity, and that's why the work needs to be done in the short term for that plant. In terms of Dargaville, we are doing some improvements this financial year, which will give us a bit more headroom in terms of growth and development going to the plant. But you will note that in the 10-year, we have got substantive money put in for major treatment plant upgrades, both in Dargaville, Te Kuperu and other areas across the district. So what we're having to do, and it's a challenge, and it's been no fun, but it's something that we have to do in terms of we need to address the here and now, and where we can do some modifications this year. We've started those. It gives us a bit of headroom, and then we'll push it out into years 4 and 5. In terms of whether we do the 1 month or 3 month, I might just defer that to Jason, our CEO.
Sure. Thank you, Anand Nama. So thanks, Councillor Nair, for your question. So there are a couple of reasons for this, and they're indicated in the presentation as well. Now, rating and charging the rates for the first instalment notice gets really complicated and difficult if you have a delay that is longer than we think 1 month we can manage it, because you have to base your rate and strike your rate, phrase it in old-fashioned phrase, on the previous quarter. And so it gets quite problematic when you have to then charge it and then change it, and then re-look at the amount you've charged, and the public find it very difficult, community find it very difficult to understand that. Very basic terms, but that's getting the nods from Christine, which is great. Another good reason, of course, is it's I suppose, a compounding problem. So if you delay by 3 months, then the annual report, remembering that the same teams are doing this work, needs to be delayed by 3 months. They've allowed that opportunity for us. So that would be, December for the annual report, and we're supposed to be mid-flight for the annual plan, the next annual plan. And all of the work for that annual plan has to be done up until December. There's no delay on the next annual plan. So it's a concertina effect that creates problems. And that's why we're trying. When we talked to the team in December, as soon as the minister notified us, we went through quite a process with our team. And we believe that 1 month is the best approach for less disruption to the community and less disruption in the year ahead for our strategic planning.
Thank you, Mr. Just clarification. Thank you, Mr. Jason. Are any other councils following the same 1 month thing, or they are taking the longer window? Do you have any?
So all the Northland councils are in this position. All of us were required to exclude the Three Waters. My understanding is that Whangarei District Council has taken the same approach. I'm not sure what Far North District Council are doing, but I can imagine they'd be very similar.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't expecting to. Okay. Theory numbers in terms of looking at percentage increase in rates over even 3 years, we're looking at a total of $57 million, which is more than, if that was all covered by debt, that's more than doubling our current level of debt. Any indication as to how much of that would attract development contributions, be funded by development contributions?
The piece of work is underway now, and we'll present it on the 21st, and that'll give you a good, clear picture in terms of it.
Thank you.
Councillor Lambert.
That's half my question. The GST refunds from central government, is that a possibility to add to development contributions and GST refunds, or to go alongside development contributions. There's some talk of that. No? Okay. Well,
I mean, the Act policy.
that was Act.
Yeah, that is- that might not be.
That would help also, yes?
Everything helps, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a question, councillor Williams? Was it you? No, any further questions? Sue Davis would like to make a comment.
Just to add to the point of that, in development contribution. None of us in development still have to fund it.
Yeah, that's right.
Standing.
Thank you. Very much. If there's more information come on the 7th,
21st.
21st.
Yeah, there'll be roading information coming on the 7th.
Oh, the rating information on the 7th. Okay.
Well done.
So,
Jump on.
my advice to members is to get your head around these documents as best you can, because we've got some significant decision making to make in the next few months. I would imagine. Thank you very much.
Just before we stand in, can I have one quick question and observation? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We talked briefly, it came up that overall, and we've seen now what the valuations are doing, and the impact there. We've talked about, and I think about roading in particular, but I'm sure that it applies across water, of 40% plus increases that we've experienced before we start anything. Right? And that's really come across last 3 years. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time contemplating and looking at these figures and saying, you know, how far do you cut and what do you do? It's not something for today, but this to be thinking about for us. In my way of thinking, we're in a real conundrum in that, you know, we have probably a mindset that we'd love to have as lower rate increase as we possibly can. The reality, I believe now that we're facing is that if we're not realistic with a rate increase, as unpalatable as that might be, we run the potential of going backwards in terms of our services, our core services and the likes, at a faster rate than has ever been contemplated and has been achieved in the past. So I think it's going to take some bold application and here, but I for one think that and believe emphatically that is part of leadership. We've got to show pathway to move this district forward. And, you know, it's a real balancing act. I think that we can't leave the ratepayers here, the current ratepayers in limbo, knowing that they are going to have a catch up in years gone by, is it if we don't bite a big bullet when it comes to this. I hope that was clear enough.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a question, it was a statement.
That's it.
We're in a briefing when it comes to me. Thank you very much. So look, there's a lot of resolve questions to be asked, and you know, we've got to get our head around a lot of this information quite quickly. Thank you very much.
Leave it next for February.
I thought that was your campaign speech here.
Right, can we keep going? We don't need a refreshment break now, do we?
Going.
I don't think we do. Let's have, move straight into Sue, please.
Yeah. If it was a bank.
Good morning, Mayor and councillors. So just
This should be fairly brief too. This is just an overview. It's just so that it helps with your understanding that development contributions are, we review the policy every 3 years. And they're taken, the contributions are taken for public infrastructure built for future growth. What normally happens is that the council builds it and it actually collects, although in some areas we collect the contributions before the infrastructure is built. And like, for example, our libraries, we're starting to collect for the Mangawhai Community Library and Hub at the moment. But most of the infrastructure is, and then we collect the development contributions after from the growth. So I've just shown you what the table is we collect. I've also shown you on page 2 the balances. So you'll see that for open spaces and reserves, which I think there's a couple of projects that we've had in the past, the Mangawhai Library and I think it was Kaiwi Lakes, there's some money there. We've been collecting development contributions for, but the key ones of our infrastructure are obviously changing, the demand is changing, and you can see the biggest one is the wastewater. And we've only started in the last couple of years charging for developers for Dargaville and Mangataroto wastewater and water supply. And primarily that's been for reticulation because there's been no amounts that we've taken into account for treatment plants because that hasn't come up from our infrastructure department until this long-term plan.
Ready for questions?
Yep, that's.
Okay, Councillor Lambert, followed by Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Larson.
Is this a mess? Is there a lot of history behind it and that's why everything's so different? Is the septic system the same in Mangawhai as it is in Dargaville for a new?
No.
Okay.
So that's the thing. So what's also changing is environmental standards as well. So in Dargaville, Mangataroto, we basically put sewage into ponds and it flows through one pond into the next pond and it's cleansed by plants and straight out to sea. Whereas in
that's got a membrane filter as well before the installation to the harbour.
So it all depends on what model car they've got and how many add-ons I've got and everything else that comes to this.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's fine.
And also what we're finding now is the resource consents are coming up for renewal, some of those plants. So we have to look at the environmental standards plus treatment for future because we've got plan change and we have got growth over the district.
That's very much a user pays this, is it? Or projected user?
Yes, but what you'll find is sometimes, like to give you an example, Cove Road, we've got that in as one of our growth projects. It's not 100% growth because the current population will use it as well. So although you could say it's, so we have to determine the percentage that is then attributed to the growth of the population. So some of the current population pay for items as well. So it's a complex calculation.
I'll put you, actually, I will jump you in front because you want to ask relevant to what she was just saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there not a situation where we're talking about that Cove Road intersection with Tara Road and all that sort of schmozzle? Was that the specific thing? Or?
No, I was talking about Cove Road where we're looking at linking up with Mangawhai Central from.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's a new road.
Brand new road.
But will be used by existing population as well. But what about the situation where there's an existing road and I think that intersection is, well, an upgrade of that, it's satisfactory to a certain level of population, and then the population grows by another couple of thousand people, traffic numbers, whatever, and it kicks it over into the need to, say, go from 2-lane to 4-lane or realignment or traffic lights or whatever. Is that because that wouldn't have been needed but for the growth, could that not be funded entirely by growth?
But no, potentially. But what you'll find is that it probably should have been recognised years before and a lot more people should have been paying for it. So therefore, you've got to say some of the current population has to pay for it. Or it may be that the developer's doing the development adjacent to that, and snap, we'll get you. You can pay a financial contribution. It's not a development as well as a development contribution. So,
Thank you, councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Sue. If I go back, and I think we've had a previous conversation at meeting, and we use the Dargaville $90 eroding contribution. And I think that you explained, and so it's important that we're clear, that you explained that that was set, as token as it is, only on the basis that there was no specific new roading work planned, or very, very little. Whereas for Mangawhai or Kaiwaka, there were obviously projects set, so the roading contribution was 3,400. So it's been done on the basis of defined projects.
yes, and they appear in the development contributions policy, the projects, and we also mark out the percentages that we attribute to growth.
So what happens in a situation, and I'm not sure that it has, but let's just take a scenario, say over in Dargaville, that if subsequent to those being set back in 2020 or 2021, and a whole roading project had to happen, there was no facility until now to change that contribution from $90 up to a more realistic level, was it?
No, but the $90 probably is realistic, given at that time, there was no new footpaths going in,
Yep.
no new roads, they've all been built.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is renewals there.
Okay, all right, okay. So my second point was, just so we're absolutely clear, on the back page, you got wastewater, DC, development contribution, debt owing, 28.7 million. Can you just, but absolute clarity, explain, as obvious as it may seem, as I'm reading that, that's saying is that actually we've paid out 28 million that has still to be claimed back.
Recouped, yes.
Recouped. All right. And so we're going to find new developments, or is that attributed to existing projects?
No, the developments have already been done. So that will increase. In fact, it increased from last time because of the balance tank.
Yeah, I thought it was 24 million, you know. So we're behind the 8 million already.
Well, that's, every council's like that. I think, you know, because you're building ahead of.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And you.
What it is that you've got to have at the current rate of $25,000. There's an awful lot of, you know, something in the order of 1,000, 1,200 contributions that are going to be made, i.e. developments that are going to be done.
That's right, because you.
But that's new.
Yeah, you build for, because it's been built for a larger, not just building for now, you're building for the future. And there's a lot of the infrastructure is going to last 30 years, be available for 30 years to new populations.
Right, okay.
Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks, Lou. Can you just clarify for me, please, the Roding East development contribution? I struggle to find a map which indicates where it is. I'm just looking at the long-term plan at the moment, which has the table with development contribution. Clarify that?
Yes, I think we do have a map. I could send it out, but I think it goes over to Kaiwaka. I'm not sure if it goes as high as Mangataroto.
Because there are roading development contributions for Kaiwaka and Mangataroto as well. I've previously asked this question and the answer I was given was that those areas pay twice. But I've subsequently heard that they don't pay twice So there seems to be a bit of uncertainty around how this is actually being applied.
Okay, I'd have to go back and ask. I thought it was only, you either paid one or the other. So, yeah, I don't know myself because I don't do the invoicing.
Yeah, that's fine, Pete. That'd be great.
Find out.
Okay, councillor Lambert.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, or if you could clarify for me in relation to Dargaville, most of the arterial routes are sorted, but also the town is served by state highways, which aren't our concern. Would that be a correct assumption? It's a main
Thoroughfare, yeah, state highway.
And so any new development, subdivision, or that will be paid for by the developer himself.
That's right.
So that's probably why it's so low in Dargaville. Would that be correct?
That's right. And also in Dargaville, they had the practice of building footpaths at the same time. So they've already been built.
It's all green side out here. Everything's going to be made.
Okay, councillor Mayer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sue. Just two questions. One, obviously, follow on from what Councillor Lambert raised about this wastewater treatment plant on Dargaville. And I guess you mentioned about the environment concern. That's why the Mangawhai is a different one. But would it be possible to upgrade Dargaville with those environmental changes when we want to do it? Or at that time, we will say, sorry, we can't do it because the government has put in these changes. Can we extend that plant as it is? That's the first question. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, I'll put on my engineering hat, but I think
Anim can answer it. I don't know, but
yeah,
environmental.
But I think look, we will be forced to change it when the resource consent does come due. I think fairly soon in the next few years. So we won't get it renewed. We have to provide for a new treatment plant.
So why we are not? So follow on that. So is why we are not providing the substantial sum for this upgrade. In the LTP.
I think you'll find that Anand has got it and some work going for it, and he's explained, he's already got some money in this next year to start the work for development, because you have to be shown, I mean, we can get an extension on our current resource consents if we can show that we're actually working towards the improvements.
Thank you.
Second, sorry, Mr. Mayor, just second question was on having lost that $8 million proposal on footpath and all. We haven't provided much for footpaths and roading in Dargaville. It is not that all is highway. There's a lot of it. The town itself is not. A lot of people need those footpaths as well. So, is there any particular reason that we have not discovered that need? Especially with the new developments and on going on. Thank you.
So we will be looking at roading again because Anand will be providing you a 10-year spreadsheet and we'll be pointing out what those items are funded by development contributions. And if you wish to bring that up at that time and get some council backing, we could put it in. But that does have consequences because it won't be 100% for development. In fact, for growth, it's more likely to be current costs that fall on the current users.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to say something there, Aaron? Okay, councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to suggest that a council should perhaps examine, and this might be your field, attracting some significant capital from a party perhaps being encouraged and led into a residency here in Kaipara, albeit in return for a substantial investment in the sort of things you're looking for at the moment. It would be small change to the appropriate people from perhaps China if $10,000 got them residency here. You might get $1 million. And that would go a long way with some of these things that we're looking for. they would also bring talents that that Kaipara needs too.
So we do have an economic development advisor that started this week, so that'll be in his mandate to look at how we can attract people to live here, and obviously we'll work within the government rules.
That's on my list of can-dos, maybe. Yeah. Okay, any further question, councillor Larson?
Yeah, I'd just like to come back to this roading east, which Michael has pointed us to the map further down the LTP than I had anticipated. And the map covers the entire area all the way up to the Brynderwyns, including Mangawhai and Kaiwaka, and the legend says that that is the area that it's imposed upon. And so if that were the case, then there is also a Mangawhai roading development contribution and a Kaiwaka roading development contribution, which would seem that they obviously apply to those areas as well. Then by policy, it appears as if both charges do apply or are being applied to those areas.
Or is it the $90?
Okay, that's something we can look at with this review and changing the maps if that's, but I'll have a look at that. It might be historical.
Be interesting to understand what the current practice is and whether that current practice system will follow.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on that, and we can look at that when we review the policy itself. I mean, it's set historically, so.
Further questions? You want to say anything to say?
Sorry, Your Worship. One of the matters that was raised recently was around disincentivising accommodation business establishing here because of the charges that were being imposed on them per pan. We're looking at the units of demand component of this development contributions policy, and I can't see anything that sort of stands out to me as being consistent with that. How is that arising? Is it through rates or is it through development contributions?
So development contributions is one-off, and it'll be a minor cost of the whole project in the developers look at it, but it is based on commercial floor space. So that's how we determine the household units for a commercial business.
So for an accommodation business where you have multiple units, are we currently charging 25K for a Mangawhai wastewater development contribution for each unit?
I would think so, because, there's 25 pans being used each day. It's the equivalent of a household.
Yes.
Equivalent. So, but it's done on floor space. So until,
I'd just be interested to have some clarity around that, because I have heard a couple of instances where accommodation, despite there being a shortage of accommodation here, haven't set up because the costs were going to be too onerous. Now, I don't know whether that's the development contributions or their ongoing charges for pans, or quite how that works with the commercial business in terms of their targeted rate. It may be a combination of both of those factors.
Yep, for target rate, they definitely get charged by how many pans, more than one pan,
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Right, thank you very much. That's our first question for the start of the year. I'll just let CE Maris make a comment.
Cool, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and great to see you all. I know it's not normal to have a January briefing, so thank you for making the effort to attend today. Really important. We're going to be under the pump. I just want to sort of just reflect what Tracy presented quickly this morning as well, just so you're all very aware. We're going to be under the pump over the next few months as we need to do. It'll be truncated. We will be trying our best to present the information to you in a format that you can easily give us feedback on. And we're going to be all working hard to get it the LTP adopted and 1 month later. And then, we'll be swiftly straight into the board as well. And I just want to point out also the benefits of your decision to go for the LTP light in this space. With the 3-year LTP, which is unaudited, that buys us a lot more time. But it also gives us that flexibility when the government do come out with the approach for Three Waters. And you're right, the minister has said publicly, regional CCO is the model they're looking at, but there's a few steps in place that they will need to put in to enable that to occur. So that's not going to happen quickly, which is why we're putting Three Waters in for the 3 years. That allows us to adjust quite quickly when the government do change.
It's good want to have us for a dance partner anyway.
The key to the approach, if I'm honest, will be the word voluntary. It's been used before.
Yeah.
Government has voluntary CCO. I don't, if I can say publicly, I don't think anything happens voluntarily in local government. It needs to be a little bit more.
Well, like why Whangarei wants.
So my key point is all the information's there in front of you. Like Mr. Mayor said before, please make sure you look at it, read it, especially the Three Waters stuff and the projects that are planned. And what Anand said is we know we're going to try and do the best we can to keep the rates increase low, but also recognising that there is a lot of investment we need to make now in that Three Waters space. Right. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.